Donald Trump already faces 3 criminal indictments, 2 federal cases, one in Florida and the other in Washington, D.C., and 1 state case in New York. But this time next week, Donald Trump could be dealing with his 4th indictment in 5 months, this time a state case in Georgia. Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis, who's been investigating Donald Trump's attempt to overturn Georgia's 2020 election results, is expected to present her case in front of a grand jury in just a few days. And judging by the scene outside of the Fulton County Courthouse, Atlanta law enforcement is ready. The Associated Press reports, quote, Fulton County Sheriff Pat Labatt has said he's in meetings every day to prepare for a possible indictment. In anticipation of potential charges, his deputies erected barriers last week along the block in front of the main courthouse. The street was closed this week and parking is prohibited on nearby streets. Those measures are to remain in place through the end of next week, Labatt's office said. While Fani Willis's case against Donald Trump overlaps with special counsel Jack Smith's January 6th investigation into Donald Trump, there could be one key difference. Fani Willis could bring state racketeering charges against Donald Trump and some of his allies. Georgia's version of the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, or better known as RICO, was modeled after the 1970 federal law aimed at taking down the mafia. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution reports, quote, RICO is often used to try to prove that a legal business was being used for illegal means. And in the beginning, the law was used to prosecute those involved in drug trafficking or organized crime. But in recent years, prosecutors have also applied it to government officials accused of using their offices for personal gain, such as those named in the indictment against various former and current Atlanta public school officials. In 2021, Fani Willis retained John Floyd, a lawyer and expert in racketeering, shortly after opening up her investigation into Donald Trump. Reuters reported at the time that John Floyd was, quote, hired recently to provide help as needed on matters involving racketeering, including the Trump investigation and other cases. Fani Willis has also openly said that she's a fan of RICO.
I'm a fan of RICO. I've told people that. And the reason that I am a fan of RICO is I think jurors are very, very intelligent. They want to know the whole story. They want to know what happened. They want to make an accurate decision about someone's life. And so RICO is a tool that allows a prosecutor's office and law enforcement to tell the whole story.
RICO charges could allow prosecutors to charge Trump's allies with breaching voting machines in Georgia. The Guardian is reporting that Fani Willis now has enough evidence to charge Trump's allies with computer trespass felonies, according to 2 people briefed on the matter. Joining us now, Amy Lee Copeland. She is a criminal defense attorney and former Georgia federal prosecutor. Amy Lee, thank you for being here. How does Georgia's racketeering statute apply to the Trump case?
Thank you, Jonathan, for having me tonight. The Georgia racketeering statute applies to the Trump case because, as you noted, it's broader than the federal statute. Georgia has 43 additional state crimes that are named as racketeering predicate acts or bases for a racketeering charge. Included in that list is the computer trespass felony, and that is what the allegation is that happened in the voting machines in Coffee County, Georgia, where the GOP officials down there went in and looked at what was going on. They did it not once, not twice, but 3 different times. And so that is one potential predicate act that, even though it occurred in another county, as long as one overt act for RICO occurred in Fulton County, it would stick in terms of venue in that county.
And Georgia's RICO statute, quote, requires a pattern of misconduct as shown by violations of 2 or more crimes specified in the statute. These predicate crimes can include committing or soliciting false statements, forgery, computer trespass, as you just mentioned, and influencing witnesses. So given all that, Amy Lee, what challenges could DA Willis face in pursuing Georgia RICO charges against Donald Trump and his allies?
Sure. It is a broad statute. It is by statute supposed to be very liberally construed, but there could be defenses that people simply weren't acting in concert, that they had gone rogue, or that they weren't interrelated, or that everyone was sort of doing his or her own thing. That seems difficult given the activity, though, that we know about when Mr. Giuliani goes to meet with Georgia legislatures for 3 different times, when I believe Ms. Powell, Sidney Powell's foundation, assisted in the payment for the Coffee County voting machine breach. That could be a difficult defense for him because, again, it is a statute that is very broadly construed and covers a wide range of activity.
Mm-hmm. The New York Times reports, Amy Lee, nearly 20 people are known to have been told that they could face charges as a result of the investigation. If Donald Trump and his allies are indicted, will each individual be charged at the same time?
It's likely. There is one notable exception, though. Burt Jones, the GOP, the now lieutenant governor, and who was a GOP candidate, and Miss Willis was disqualified from his case last summer. But the Georgia Prosecuting Attorneys Council will assign a new prosecutor to look into that. But likely everybody will be indicted together, Jonathan.
One more question for you. From what you know of the case, are there other charges that a potential Georgia indictment could include that we haven't seen against Trump yet?
Yes. Georgia has a number of statutes that talk about election interference in Title 21 of the Georgia Code. That's solicitation to commit election interference, conspiracy to commit election interference, tampering with ballots. Those have been part of the Georgia Code for a number of years, and those could be standalone acts independent of RICO that the state could bring against Mr. Trump.
Here's Biden's 2024 campaign manager, Julie Chavez Rodriguez, on the Ohio win. Watch.
We're encouraged by what we're seeing in Ohio, and it's yet another data point based on what we've seen, really across the country in so many states and throughout the midterm. Exactly that point that, abortion is a potent issue, and it's an issue that is top of mind for many voters across this country.
So while Vice President Kamala Harris has been very vocal about abortion rights and the attacks by Republicans, President Biden is largely focused on the economy. Should the president speak more forcefully on this issue, or do you see this as a good balance?
Well, I think the president has spoken out about the importance of reproductive freedom. And I think that voters understand that Democrats are to be trusted. They can be trusted to protect women's freedom to make their own healthcare decisions, including about abortion. And they get that Republicans, given half a chance, are going to look to put forward a national abortion ban if they get control of the White House and Congress. And I used to be an organizer, and I know a galvanizing issue when I see one. And this is galvanizing because people care a lot about it, a lot. They're angry about it, and they can see that their vote is going to make a big difference in what happens. So, yeah, I think this is a very potent issue. And I think that, Republicans don't have a message problem here. They have a values problem because they are not on the side of most American voters when it comes to abortion rights.
That's actually an excellent point. Not a message problem, but a values problem. So despite putting justices on the Supreme Court that helped get us here, Senator, Donald Trump now says the abortion issue hurt Republicans in last year's midterms. Congresswoman Nancy Mace said Republicans need to find, quote, that middle ground, whatever that is. Do you see the Republican Party changing its messaging, if not its values?
Well, so here what you see is they can see that they are not on the side of voters. Voters are understanding that. They have lost 7 big campaigns in 7 different states, including red states like Ohio and Montana. And so what they're trying to do is to obscure where they are. Now they're either doubling down or they're trying to obscure what their positions are. And I don't think that voters are going to buy it. I think that they understand where the Republican Party is on this. And that's why it's going to matter so much, not to the exclusion of economic issues, which are always going to be important to voters. But you can't run away from this if you are a Republican who wants to be president or wants to be senator in Ohio or Montana or Wisconsin. You're going to have to be held accountable for how you're out of step with the voters.
Mm-hmm. With your past work for Planned Parenthood, and you mentioned this a moment ago, does it surprise you to see red states like Kentucky and Kansas voting this way?
Yeah. Well, it's so interesting because I've seen red states like North Dakota and South Dakota reject ballot initiatives taking away women's freedom to make really often difficult healthcare decisions about their reproductive lives, including abortion. So in some ways, it doesn't really surprise me. I think that what has changed is that after the overturning of Roe, more Americans, independents, more than half of all Republicans, a little less, I should say, than half of Republicans who believe that abortion should be legal in all or most cases, see that that's really at risk. They can see the impact of this in states like Texas and other places, what happens to women's health when they don't have the opportunity to exercise that freedom and make their own decisions. So I think what's changed now is that it is so much more urgent because of what the Supreme Court that Donald Trump put into place has done to women's health care in this country.
Mm-hmm. We were talking about the Supreme Court and Donald Trump. Let's talk about Senator Tommy Tuberville, your colleague. He's been blocking about 200 military promotions because the Defense Department provides paid time off and travel expenses for those seeking abortions. Do you see a way through this fight when the Senate returns next month?
Well, the way through this fight is for Senator Tuberville's Republican colleagues to hold him accountable and get him to stop it. There is really no other path. I mean, if the United States Senate were to try to vote on every single one of these military promotions that Senator Tuberville, in an unprecedented way, is holding up, I mean, it would grind the United States Senate to a complete halt. And it would set a terrible precedent for other extremists to completely block the Senate. So Mitch McConnell and Senator Tuberville's colleagues have to get him to stop it and stop this, what is a threat to not only our military readiness, but also to the morale and the ability to retain talent in the United States military because of how he is politicizing so irresponsibly such a basic process in the military, which is simple promotions.
America's natural wonders are our nation's heart and soul. That's not hyperbole, that's a fact. They unite us, they inspire us. A birthright we pass down from generation to generation. First time I saw the Grand Canyon years ago, I was a young senator. As I stood there and looked out, a phrase came to mind. It was instinctive. I said, this is God's cathedral. That's what it reminded me of. It just is so magnificent.
That was President Biden this week at a ceremony proclaiming that nearly 1 million acres of federal land is now officially a new national monument. Its full title, which you can see here on this sign at the ceremony, is a combination of two native languages, Havasupai and Hopi, and the English portion is Ancestral Footprints of the Grand Canyon National Monument. This map shows the three areas located both to the north and south of the Grand Canyon that now make up the nation's newest natural preserve. This land is sacred to numerous Native American tribes. Tuesday's event was held at Red Butte, a site that is particularly important to the Havasupai tribe. They were among the indigenous people who were driven out of the land around the Grand Canyon by colonization, something President Biden noted in his remarks.
From time immemorial, more than a dozen tribal nations have lived, gathered, prayed on these lands. But some 100 years ago, they were forced out. That very act of preserving the Grand Canyon as a national park was used to deny indigenous people full access to their homelands, to the places where they hunted, gathered, took precious sacred ancestral sites. They fought for decades to be able to return to these lands, to protect these lands from mining and development, to clear them of contamination, to preserve their shared legacy for future generations. Today's action is going to protect and preserve that history along with these high plateaus and deep canyons. Majestic red cliffs over 300 million years old, older than the oldest dinosaur ever known, central to the creation stories of so many tribal people and so many tribal nations.
For decades, my next guest has been part of the fight to get environmental justice for the tribal nations who were forced out of these lands. She's been a witness before Congress, a delegate to the United Nations in Geneva, Switzerland, and she presented the Havasupai uranium case at the World Uranium Hearings in Salzburg, Austria, 31 years ago. Indeed, this has been a long time coming. Joining me now, Carletta Talusi, a member of the Havasupai tribe. Ms. Talusi, thank you very much for being here. Please explain to folks watching why these lands are so important and what it means to you to see them become a national monument.
Thank you. This land is very important to many tribes in the Southwest. 13 tribes, and this is where we believe in our creation stories we emerged from. And when we pass away and leave this earth, that's where we will be returning. That's how important this place is.
Mm-hmm. Earlier this week, you told one report, I'm going to quote here, "I'm sad that my relatives who worked on this have passed on and aren't here, but I know they're here in spirit." Ms. Talusi, what else would you like to tell your relatives about the sacrifice it took to get this done?
A lot of people sacrificed their time. This was a grassroots effort that began in 1984 by my tribal elders, and they never wavered, and they stood firm, and we continued to voice our opposition even though it got hard. We did it as a community, we did it as a family, and we're so happy that this decision was made by the president this past week.
I don't want to give people the impression that the work is done. What more would you like to see happen in your ongoing fight for environmental justice?
This proclamation was very historic to all the tribes, and we're very happy that we finally have a seat at the table to make decisions on how our ancient sites are being protected. Our waters are going to be protected. Our place of worship is going to be protected, and also our ancient burial sites. And those are very important to us. And yes, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done, and we look forward to working together with the federal agencies to protect our special places, especially our water and our livelihood.
Mm-hmm. On a personal note, your daughter introduced President Biden before he spoke on Tuesday. What was it like for you to watch that happen?
It was very emotional for my family and my community, and but we were so proud of her and how she took on this task for all the tribes and all the community. And we're just very proud of how strong she was, and she was evidence of how our elders chose very strong words to protect our community and our sacred lands, and she took it on like a champ.
Ms. Talusi, one more question for you. So now, when tourists come to visit the Grand Canyon, they can come see this national monument as well. What else about this special place do you want people to know before they come to visit?
I want them to know that there are 21 tribes in Arizona, and 13 tribes in Arizona hold this place as a holy place, and that everyone that visits this place should enjoy it and receive its blessing, and that you walk away feeling that this place is very special to many, many people, and we want to share it with the world that come and visit.